Hello, Dr. J. Smith. Today is the 17th of June, and there's been all kinds of havoc going on the internet, which is fascinating because on the internet is where this discussion really needs to belong, mainly because it gets out to many more people much quicker. Such a broader spectrum of people who are hearing and watching, and I'm getting emails, I'm getting texts, I'm getting phone calls. Everybody wants to find out about what just happened in the last 2 to 3 weeks. So what I decided to do, because people have asked me to do this, they said, listen, Jay, can you make sense of all this? Can you help us? Can you really put it all and put it into a sequence of events, but also a sequence of what we're talking about? Because what they're hearing over and over again is this discussion on the preservation of the Quran has everything to do with Qira'at. Qira'at, in the 8th and 9th century, late 8th, early 9th century, even up into the 10th century. And that's all that this is about. And yet there is a much more damaging debate and discussion needs to happen in the 7th century and the early 8th century, the Razm debate. And we're not talking about that. We're only over here. And I think there's an intention. I know people like Shabir Ali. Dr. Shabir Ali would like to keep it there. He does not want to get it off this debate. In fact, the vast majority of Muslims, especially academic Muslims, and Shabir Ali is one of them, would like to only make sure that we're talking about the Qira'at. He's scared to death if we get over here to the 7th century. You saw what happened in 2014 when we brought it up at that time. So what I want to do is to walk you through the sequence of not only what's been going on the internet, but also what this whole debate's about. Now, back on the 19th of May, Shabir Ali was the first to go public with it's not the first time he's done this publicly, but it's the first time that we paid attention to it, or the most people realized what he was saying. And he said very clearly at that time, on the 19th, nothing really spectacular. He just said, yes, there are different qira'ats, different readings, different dialects. He kept on saying dialects, recitations. And that's all it was. But that they did not change any belief, any doctrine, or any practice. And he must have said that over and over again, just to make sure that we realize that this still preserves the Quran, because though there are a number of qira'ats, he just said a number. He didn't tell you what number or how many changes they're talking about. He didn't want to get into that. He was very careful not to give you any numbers. When that came up, we really jumped on that, because this is great for someone of his stature, of his notoriety, and of his ability to make this kind of admission so publicly. And I put up 3 different videos, and then he decided that he was going to attack me. And so he put up an 1.5-hour video just confronting me, trying to say that I'm misguiding people, that I'm blowing something completely out of proportion. He went on with that, and then he spent almost most of the time just talking about our Bible. So he didn't even respond to that. He was saying that I put up a straw dog and then I attacked a straw dog and didn't really confront him. I'm not going to spend much time there, because that was just Shabir Ali attacking me. Then on June 8th, we had this amazing interview by Muhammad Hijab. Now, Muhammad Hijab represents the East, as what's his name? Qadhi said. He represents the traditional Islam. He represents, I would suggest, 99% of all Muslims. Muhammad Hijab is a very well-known YouTuber. He's very big on the YouTube. I think he has about 120 or 227 or 229,000 subscribers, people who get his videos. So he's very well known. Muhammad Hijab, I know very well. We've engaged with each other. If you go up on Fander Films, you'll see a debate that I did with him, where he's sitting there tensing his muscles, trying to be a real, actually he looked out of the foolish, but nonetheless, he's about 6'5", 6'8", very tall. And when he would engage with me and I'm on the ladder, his face would be right next to mine. He's that tall. He doesn't even need a ladder. But he was there when we introduced the Qira'at, we introduced the different Qira'at variations. We introduced this back in 2016, 4 years ago. He was in the crowd. I showed you that clip last week. And there he was in the crowd, pulling all the Muslims away. He looks a lot thinner then, because he's put on a lot of weight since then. And he was pulling the Muslims away so they wouldn't hear this. And I assume that since 2016, he himself has gone through a crisis of faith, because then last week, on June 8th. He had a long discussion, an hour and 45 minutes, with Dr. Yasir Qadhi. Dr. Yasir Qadhi represents the West. He represents academia. He represents United States, like Shabir Ali represents Canada and North America. So the two real scholars in this whole discussion are Shabir Ali and Dr. Yasir Qadhi. So they're over here. They're in America. They're having to deal with Western academia. And so that's why they are in a completely different environment than, say, the Muhammad Hijabs over here. The Muhammad Hijabs, they are really in the traditional area, or the orthodox view of Islam. Now, Yasir Qadhi will say he's orthodox, so is Shabir Ali. They would all claim to be orthodox, but I'm trying to make this distinction so you can see why this debate that happened a week ago became so explosive. Because these people are here, and I would suggest that 99% of Muslims are in this world. And the Muhammad Hijabs represent that group of Muslims, and they are very clear that the Quran has always been preserved. They are very clear that the Quran we have in our hand today, this book right here, is the exact same book, every word, every letter. Even some would claim even every dot. Now, not all of them do, but someone would claim certainly all the letters and all the words are exactly the same as that which exists in heaven, and the Quran makes that claim in chapter 85, verse 22, that was sent down to Muhammad between 610 and 632, and the Quran makes that claim in chapter 15, verse 9. So they would have to follow what the Quran says. And the Quran makes that claim itself, that it's being guarded by God, and that Allah guards it so that nothing can be changed, so there is no human intervention. They have to make that claim. They have to make that claim. Can you see the dilemma for those in this camp over here? They have to hold to that claim, and they dare not find anybody who changes that. So when Shabir Ali and Yusuf Qadhi over on this side, in that interview, especially the one that between Hijab, well, the only one between Hijab and Qadhi on June 8th, when he said, by the time that it's an hour and 45 minutes long, you're not going to see the whole interview, but nonetheless, when you get to an hour and 21 minutes, that's when the rubber started to hit the road, because then he turns to Qadhi and he says, all right, which one of these qira'ats are the official Quran? Which one is the one that was revealed to Muhammad between 610 and 630? Which is the qira'at that was actually written down at the time of Uthman in 652? He wanted to know. He put his hand out twice to ask him, what would you write here? What would you write here? Which one of these? So what is he talking about? And so most of you are asking me, what is he referring to? What is this qira'at? What is it all about? So I'm going to help you. I'm going to show you what the official word is, and I'm going to go and actually look at it right now. So let's go up and let's look at this list of names. Now, I want you to look at this list of names here, and I've got them on the screen. These are the readers and the transmitters versus Hafs. Hold on to that. We'll come to that. Look on the left side. And look down through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Nafi from Medina. Ibn Kathir from Mecca. Abu Amr ibn al-Ala. Ibn Amir from Damascus in Syria. Asim ibn al-Najud. Sorry, I'm terrible pronunciation. Forgive me for my pronunciation. And Hamza al-Zalyat, and then al-Qissa. Now, those are the 7 that are the official readers. Those are the ones that Ibn Mujahid in 936, look at the date, 936, claimed as the official ones that existed at the time of Muhammad, which is fascinating because he's saying this in 936. No one's saying this in the 7th century. No one's saying this in the century where Muhammad lived. No one's saying this in the century where Uthman canonized the text. This is all coming from 936. That's the 10th century. That is, we're talking about 300 years later. 300 years after the fact, you finally get a man named Ibn Mujahid who then canonizes those 7 right there. But hold on a minute, there's 3 more. 3 more have been added. Look at the list. Number 8, 9, and 10. Abu Ja'far and Yaqub al-Yamani and Khalaf from Medina, Basra, and Kufa. They were added at a later date. So now you have 10 of these readers. Hold on a minute. Take a look at those 10. Do you see Haf's name in those 10? The one that has been chosen today, the one that I have in my hand right here, this one, this is known as the Haf's text. Notice Haf's name is not on any of those 10. Look at the dates of those 10. Let's go back and see what the dates are. 785, 738, 770, 736, 745, 773, 804, 748, 821, 841. So all the way from 736 all the way to 844, that's a 100-year spread. 100-year spread, but they're all in the 8th and 9th century. Not one of them is in the 7th century. Not one of them is in the 600s. Not one of them is someone who actually knew Muhammad, who actually was living and putting together their readings in the 7th century. But more than that, not one of them is Hafs. So where does this Hafs come in? Now go to the other two columns on the right. According to tradition, this is what the Muslims will tell you, there are transmitters. These are people who then take what the readers said and have their own derivations, have their own their own ways of putting the dots above and below the lines. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the dots. We're talking about the diacritical marks and also the vowels, the dhamma, the kasra, and the fatha. I don't know how many times I've said that this week, but you're getting it. I think you're all getting it now. But look at the names there. Qalun, Al-Bazi, Al-Duri, Hisham, Shuba, Khalaf, Al-Layth, Isa, Ibn Warad, Ruwais, Isaac. It goes on and on and on. There's 20 of them. 20 of them that are now known as official Qira'at compilers. Along the 10 that are before, these 20 come later. Some of them were students, but you can look at their dates. They're much too late to all be their students, because look at their 9th century and one is the 8th century. In fact, the second list on the far right, I've got now in blue, and I'm going to circle in black. There is Hafs. Hafs. Where is he from? He's from Kufa. He is not from Medina. He is not from Mecca. He is not from the central part, the Hijaz. He is actually hundreds of miles away and hundreds of years different. In fact, he is 244 years after the death of Muhammad. You finally get Hafs, who died in 796. Now, remember what I said last week. I said that that to know how the Quran was compiled, you need to go to Al-Bukhari. And you need to go to 2 pages in Al-Bukhari, volume number 6, hadith number 509 and hadith number 510. I'll put them up again. I've put the same ones up over and over again. And hadith number 509 deals with the first recension, the first copy of the Quran being written down. And that was during the time of Abu Bakr. So between 632 and 634, roughly 2 years after Muhammad died. He was not alive. So the Caliph, Abu Bakr, along with Umar, who were going to be the subsequent caliph, they asked Zayd ibn Thabit to write the Quran down, write it down, because so many had been killed at the Battle of Yamama. According to tradition, around 70 were killed at the Battle of Yamama. They were the ones that had memorized it, and they were concerned that if everybody who'd memorized it died, there would be no Quran. And so they had to quickly write it down, and that's why they asked Zayd ibn Thabit. So who is Zayd ibn Thabit? He was a secretary of Muhammad. And so he writes it down. That's the first copy. He gives it to the daughter of Umar, who had been one of the wives of Muhammad, and she kept it for roughly 20 years. Now we go to hadith number, volume 6, Al-Bukhari, volume 510. We now jump 20 years. I'm going to put it up there. You can see it. This is now at the time of Uthman, 652, 20 years later. Abu Bakr and Umar are dead. Uthman now is in power, and he's been told that there are lots of recitations that are not the same. From Shams. What is Shams? Where is Shams? Well, if you ask any Muslims today, they will tell you Shams is in Syria and Iraq, and that these people were reciting differently than the ones that Muhammad had recited. So what did Uthman say? He turns to Zayd ibn Thabit, and he says, recite it in the Qurayshi dialect. Qurayshi dialect means the dialect that existed there in Mecca, in Medina, the dialect that what Muhammad would have spoken. I'm not going to get into all that right now as to how you write a Qurayshi dialect in a script that did not have diacritical marks. That's a whole other problem. But I just want to pick up on that. Notice they're to write it in the Qureshi dialect, right? Which means it should be the dialect that comes either from Mecca or Medina. Am I correct? Help me here. To me, that seems obvious. That's what's happening. That's what Uthman is demanding of Zaid ibn Thabit, Zubair, Alas, and Hisham. The four of them were to write it in the Qureshi dialect, which he did. And then he sent to all the different provinces. Whether that's 4 or 9, we're not going to get into that discussion. So that's there in 652. We see that injunction. However, it was difficult to know how to write it down, because people, when you look at the skeletal text, the Razm, there's no way to read it unless you have dots. You need to have the 1 dot above the line makes a na, 2 dots makes a ta, 3 dots makes a tha, 1 dot below makes a ba, 2 dots makes a ya. You need to have all these dots. There are 28 letters in the Arab alphabet. 22 of them need dots. Only 6 of them don't need dots. So 22 of them need dots to understand what it means. So that's why suddenly the dots had to be created, and they were created in the mid-8th century. By the late 8th century, they were starting to write these dots down and having them included in their texts. And once you do that, it all depends on where you put the dots, because you can put the dots all over the place and get many different derivations. If you just have 3 of these little bowl shapes or smiley faces attached together, depending on where you put the dots, you can get up to as many as 30 different words. Now you can see why that this was a dilemma that needed to be rectified. And that's why then you have these readers who are putting their dots in different fashions, and they were not agreeing with each other. And that's why you have 10 different readings, because the dots are in different places. And the vowels then were being introduced. The dhamma, the u sound, the kasra, the e sound, the fatha, the ah sound. Those are the 3 vowels that we have in Arabic. And so they had to add those, and that even changes it even more. So by the time the 9th century rolls around 870, you have al-Bukhari talking about the need for 7 at the time of Muhammad, 7 of these reciters at the time of Muhammad. That was then canonized by Ibn Mujahid in 936. He canonized the 7 readings, but he says that this all happened way back at the time of Muhammad. He talks about this one fellow who heard it differently, and he grabs him by the scruff of the neck, brings him to Muhammad, and has him recite it. And Muhammad, and then he recites it. And there's 2 different recitings of the same text. And Muhammad said both are okay. There are 7, but that you don't get from the 7th century. That you get from the 9th and 10th century, from al-Bukhari. That story comes from al-Bukhari. That story comes from Ibn Mujahid, and he died in the 10th century. So can you see everything that the Muslims are claiming, all these 7 reciters that I just pointed you up on the screen, all the other 3 that were added after that, that's coming from much, 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 much later. They're assuming this is what Muhammad said, but is there anything in the 7th century that says that these recitations were created or were given sanction by Muhammad? Is there anything that Muslims can show us today that this actually existed, that this actually took place in the 7th century? Nada, not a thing, nothing. We're all having to go to the 9th and 10th century to hear what they thought happened, and that's a redaction, and that's called redaction criticism, and that's why we're bringing it up. Nonetheless, let's come back. Okay, so you don't have any. So then you have 7, then you have 10, and now you have 20. Now we come to the 20th century. In the 20th century, it was obvious there in Cairo, in Egypt, that there were so many of these 30 different ways of reading the text, of reciting the text. Really, it's reading the text, because by this time, all the dots were in place, had been canonized, all the vowels are in place, and then you have the Dagar Aleph, which is introduced along the way. And so by this time, you have all these students who are coming to class there in Cairo, and they were having standardized tests on the Quran, and they were coming up with many different answers that didn't agree with each other. And this was a dilemma for the Department of Education there in Cairo, and so they had to find an answer. What are we going to do about it? So they go to Al-Azhar University, the most prestigious university in the Islamic world, even today, one of the oldest, if not the oldest. And they go to one man. His name is Muhammad al-Husayni al-Haddad. Muhammad al-Husayni al-Haddad. He's living in 1920s. And they ask him in 1924, could he choose one of these qira'at? Could he just choose one of them rather than these 30 that existed? Could he choose one? So he does. Now, If I were him, I would have gone back to al-Bukhari to find out where he should have gone. If I were him, I would have gone back to read what was actually being said there in al-Bukhari, volume 6, hadith number 510. Because if he just looked at his own traditions, the traditions are very clear that it must be a dialect from the Quraysh. It must be the Qurayshi dialect. Remember I just said this about 5 minutes ago? Isn't that very clear? Look at, you can read it. I'll just put it up here. Look at this. It must be from the Qurayshi dialect, which means it must be from Mecca, Medina. What did Muhammad al-Husayni al-Haddad do? He didn't choose Nafi. We should have chosen Nafi or Ibn Kathir, who died in 785, 738. Why did he choose those two? Because at least they were from Medina and Mecca. No, he didn't even choose any of the 10 readers. The most important ones are the first 7. He didn't choose any of those 7. Did you notice? Not one of those 7 were chosen by him. He didn't go to the subsequent 3 readers. These are the major guys. These are the first of the reciters that were the most canon. These are the canonical ones that Ibn Mujahid was talking about. These are the ones that al-Bukhari is referring to. He didn't go to any of those. He went to way over to the right. Look at the last list. He went to a guy named Hafs, died in 796. He was nothing more than a transmitter. Not one of the major readers. He was only of a transmitter. And he did not come from Mecca or Medina. He came from Kufa, which is just south of Iraq. He came from Shams. Isn't this the whole thing why Uthman said, we're having all kinds of differences coming from Shams, therefore we need to get one standard text that comes from the Qurayshi dialect. Isn't that what he said in al-Bukhari? That's what I'm sitting there shaking my head. Are you listening to this, Muslims? So why in 1924 did Muhammad al-Husayni al-Haddad choose a guy named Hafs? And as we're finding here, there's lots of problems with Hafs. There's much more than I'm bringing out now. I'm just encapsulating because I want to talk about this problem. Why does he choose a dialect that's not even the Qurayshi dialect, someone who comes from hundreds of miles away and died in 796? He should have taken one of the original readers of anything. He should have taken either Nafi or Ibn Kathir. No, he chooses Hafs. But now that they have Hafs, they took all the others, the other 29, or we now have 37 of them actually, but now 289 of them, and they dumped them into the Nile. That was in 1924. By 1936, you've heard me say this before, they had made some little changes here and there with the Hafs. Even then, there are some changes there between the Hafs. By 1936, then, they decided that this was so successful by having just one derivation, just one combination of these qira'at, that they decided to make it, that Hafs, the standard for all of Egypt. That was so successful that by 1985, King Fahd, there in Saudi Arabia, where supposedly Muhammad was born and grew up. That's a whole nother question. But anyways, 1985, he decides and looks and sees what's happening in Egypt and sees how successful that model is with Egypt. He says, we're going to make this guy, Hafs, from Kufa, who died in 796. Not from my own country. He's not even from his own country. I don't know why Fahd didn't think that through, but maybe his scholars didn't let him know that little tidbit. We're going to let this guy be the official text for all the world. For all the world. So that this is now the Hafs text. 35 years ago, it became the official text. A guy who's not even from Mecca, from Medina, not even from Arabia, now Saudi Arabia, from way over in Iraq. I love that. This is exciting. So that's why Muhammad Hijab came up to Al-Qadi. Muhammad Hijab over here in the eastern part of Islam, that is the 99%. And he's asking Al-Qadi, you're the scholar, you're the academic, which of these 30 should we really be going to? Should we be going to Hafs? Should we really be going to Ra or Ibn Jumaz? Or why don't we go to Nafi and Ibn Kathir? Those are the bigger ones. Those are the ones that he just wanted to say, which one are you going to write here? Which is the one that Uthman asked? And I would have, if I was Ibn Qadi, if I was just al-Qadi, I would have said, well, at least go back to the Meccan and the Medinan one. At least choose that one. After 25 minutes, he still couldn't respond. Oh, yes, he did respond. Hold on a minute. He did respond. What was his response? They're all okay. Every one of them is the Quran. All 30 of them are the Qurans. All 30 of them? Have you looked and seen how many differences there are? Hatun Tash, Who's Hatun Tash? She has no degree. She is nothing more than a Turkish girl who was part of our team. She works with me. I work with her. I just did a live stream with her this week. Hatun Tash was on the ladder with me for 3 years. We were on the ladder together at Speaker's Corner. She and I were the ones that introduced this way back in 2016. Hatun Tash, God bless her. She has and her team have now gone around and they've looked at just 23 of these 37 that she now has, these 37 different qira'at, these different derivations that are from the 8th and 9th century, late 8th, early 9th century. And just with looking at 23 of them, she's already found 93,000 differences. 93,000 differences. And that's going to continue to grow and grow and grow. But that's the qira'at differences. That's the ahruf, the dialectical differences that are all compared with Hafs. She does all these, comparing them with Hafs. Hafs, why? Because he is the one that's been chosen by King Fahd. That is the official one now as of 1985. So that discussion was going on, and it was causing a huge havoc last week on the internet. Then we come to Friday of last week. Friday of last week, so we're talking about the 12th of June. My good friend Adnan Rashid gets interviewed. God bless him. Adnan, if you're watching, I'm so glad that we're good friends, because what you did on Friday really helped me out. Because see, everybody seems to want to just keep on these qira'at. They just want to talk about the qira'at. They just want to keep on these 8th and 9th and 10th century. I don't really care that much about them, because I realize that as long as the Muslims keep us focused on the qira'at and the ahruf, they are not going to talk about the real elephant in the room. Well, Adnan Rashid gave us a real favor. He did us a real favor, because he was asked this question: what would you have done in Qadi's place? If you were sitting there as Yasir Qadi, what would you have said to Hijab's question? And Adnan Rashid said, I would have showed him the Birmingham Folio. I would have shown him the Husseini manuscript. Thank you, Adnan Rashid. You have finally brought it back. And actually, Adnan Rashid is correct. He should have, and Al-Qadi should have gone back to the Birmingham Folio. He should have gone back to the Husseini manuscript. Because that really is where the battle should be fighting right now. And the Al-Qadis and the Shabir Alis need to fight that battle. What are we talking about? So if you take a look at the Husseini manuscript now, Adnan Rashid was making all kinds of claims, but he spent the first 5 to 10 minutes calling me and many others like me liars, liars. He said it 15 times. You're liars, they're liars, they're liars. They don't know what they're talking about. They're liars. He yelled it. It was fascinating. I counted 15 that he called us liars. But he didn't say what we had lied about. He didn't tell us what we had lied. All we were doing was daring to ask this question about the qira'at. And he says what he should have done is gone back to the manuscripts, the earliest manuscripts. Yes, exactly. You need to go back to the earliest manuscripts. This is what I showed Shabir Ali back in 2014. 6 years ago, I showed him this, and he was not able to answer that question in that debate. Still hasn't been able to answer that question. Because when you go back to those manuscripts, there are no qira'at. There is no qira'at or ahruf in those manuscripts. There are none because there are no dots. Oh, some dots have been added later on. But originally, when they were written, there were no dots. There's no dama, kasra, fatah. Oh, some have been added later on. In fact, you'll see there's one called bimithli that has been added later on. But there's no dots in these, not in these earliest. These are razm, consonantal, skeletal text. These are the earliest ones. What are they? Well, there's 6 major ones. There's other smaller ones. You have the Topkapı, which is the one that's there in Istanbul. You have the Samarkand, which is in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. You have the Ma'il, which is in the British Library in London. You have the Petropolitanus, which is in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. You have the Husseini manuscript that Adnan's talking about, which is there in Cairo. And then the most exciting one is the Sanaa manuscript, the one that Al-Fadi is doing his doctoral thesis on. That's the most exciting because it's the oldest. It's the oldest, but not. When we say manuscript, we're not talking about a complete Quran. None of them are complete. None of them are complete. And none of them are from the 7th century. Not one of them is from the 7th century. Not one of them is from the time of Uthman. Not one of them is from the time of Uthman. That was well known. We've known that since 2007 when Tayyar Altıkılıç and Dr. Dr. Ekmel Nisanlu made that pronouncement in 2007, these two Turkish scholars who were the first ones to actually investigate and do forensic testing on them for 5 years, from 2002 to 2007. So they made it very clear that none of these major manuscripts, the 6 ones, are from the time of Uthman. None of them. None of them from the mid-7th century. And that they all start to appear in the late 7th century after Abd al-Malik, most likely, but they go up until, all the way up until, according to the Husseini, according to Francois de Roche, he puts the Husseini one in the 9th century. And there are many scholars that would probably agree with him. Altokulich puts it in the 8th century. Nonetheless, these are the earliest, and that's why they don't have any dots on them. Well, some are later on, but they don't originally have any dots because dots had not been created that early when they were written. So here we go. I love that Adnan Rashid went to do that, because now we're getting back to where we should be talking about. And this is where hijab and al-Qadi need to go to. This is the discussion over here in the 8th and 7th century, the 7th and early 8th century, that we really need to talk about. Now we are getting back to, let me see, this material here. Now we're getting back to this book. This is Dr. Daniel Allen Brubaker. If you don't have this book, buy it. You can get it on Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk. This is the book, the only one of its kind, the first of its kind. It's only been out a year now. We introduced it at Speaker's Corner, Hatun and I, on the ladder, on the day it was published. In fact, 2 hours after it was published, we went up on Speaker's Corner there on the ladder and introduced it on May 26th, 2019. So it's been out a little over a year. What's great about this is this is the first one that has actually gone and looked at them. Now I'm going to go through and show you what Dan Brubaker is saying, because this is the material that you need to listen to. This is the material that is the most damaging. This is the material Yasser Qadi and Muhammad Hijab have not looked at and dare not look at. This is the one that Adnan wants us to go to. Isn't that interesting? He wants us to go to this material. I love it. And so that's why we need to go to it. So let's just look and see what Daniel Brubaker has found. Come with me. Let's look at the screen. And let's take a look at this material. Now, I'm going to put up here, I'm just going to put up some slides. Here is one that's fascinating, because here is from Dad's book. I'm not going to put all of them. It'll take me too much time. Here is a reference to, this is the Topkapi. This is the one that's in Istanbul. And he's looking at a page from Surah 9, Ayah 72. Now, if you look over where the green arrow is, you can see a hua that has been added there. In the 1924 edition, that's the Hafs text. It says, and Allah's good pleasure is greater, that is the great triumph. The new word hua, that is, has been added to the text. Can you see it's in a different nib? It's squished in there between the two larger words. And you can see it doesn't belong there from the beginning. It's been added at a later date. Now, it doesn't change the meaning very much. It now conforms to the current Hafs text, the one that we're talking about. Because of hua, it uses a different hand nib and style. This suggests post-production at a much later date. So you can see there is a change of the text. They didn't need to put it in there. So why did they put it in there? To correspond with the current Hafs text that is now being standardized all over the world. Now let's go to the next one. Here we go to Surah 42, Ayah 2. Here you have an eraser in the Petropolimus. This is the one that's there in France, in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. Surah 42, number 2. Now, here you have lahum, for them, has been added in the verse. The original used to be lam he, to him, lahu. Now, instead of for him, it now is for them. So it's been made from third masculine singular to third plural, them. Or do they have associates who enacted for them? You can see it's been erased. You can even see it indistinctly. You can see the lahu in the background, and lahum in a completely different ink has been added at a later date. Why did they need to do that? Why did they go from enacted for him to enacted for them? Well, because that now corresponds with the Hafs text. Now I'll take you a look at this one here. Here you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different circles around the word Allah, the name for God. 9 different instances from a total of 12 which Dan discovered. mostly in the Fustat Umayyad Codex, that's the one in Egypt. Why would scribes forget the word for their God? And do you even need the word for their God in those places? All of the ones in green, you don't need it. Only the one in yellow, do you really need it? You need it to give you give context. The other 8, it's well known that this is referring to God. So there's no reason to add them. You can see they've been added above the line. They've been added at a later date. They've been added in a different name, a nib. And can you see by doing that, the reason they have done that in those 8 instances is so that it corresponds with the Hafs text, the 1924 text. Now we get to another problem, that is called erasers. Here's chapter 30, verse 9. This is from the National Library of Russia in St. Petersburg. Here's a folio 30V, and it's on just one ayah. And they've erased between Akibatu, the fate, and Aladina of those. They've erased something. What did they erase? We don't know. You can't tell. But now that they have erased it, it now agrees with the 1924 Hafs text. The size of the eraser suggests it was about 4 to 6 letters. Maybe it could have been Kulumin, or it could have been Katiran Min. That's what Daniel's thinking. Or it could have been Al-Yahud, the Jews, or Al-Nas, the people. We don't know, because we don't have anything to go on except the eraser. But it's obvious that what was there before is not there now. It's obvious that what was there before disagreed with the Hafs text, and that's why they had to add it now. Look at this 5th example. Here's a 5th example. Now, this is actually the cover of his book. And you can see it's from Surah 6, Ayah 91. It's in the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha. The word Ilahi against him has been written over. This is number 1. Look at number 1 up on the right there. And an eraser in Surah 693 following the words Bima kuntum takulun, for what you used to say. Yet Ilahi is not in the 1924 Hafs text. It's not in the text that we have today. Now, outside of the margin, you have Allah, Allah, about Allah, has been written in the margin, but oddly enough, without erasing the Ilahi that it is intended to supplant. That should be there, because that is in the Hafs text. They put it on the margin without actually changing it around, so they kept the error so you can see it. That's lovely. Now look at number 3, and the word Aladina, whom, has been inserted where it was at first omitted. So it's been brought in because they realized, it doesn't fit the Hafs text. Now it does. Coming down to number 4, near the bottom of the page, you can see the word Ya'lamun, they know, has been written over an eraser. If you look carefully, you can see the shadow of the original text. You can still see it. And possibly, according to what Dan thinks, it's a BHMWN. Now, what's fascinating is all of these corrections outside of the one at the top, which they should have not kept out in the margin, they should put it into the text itself, all now agree with the 1924 Hafs text. I don't want to give you too many more. I want to just end with one more, because this is the one that is one of my favorites, and this is the one I love, because it is the Husseini text that Adnan brought up last Friday. Adnan said this is the best text. This is 99% of the Quran, and it was written before 790. You can go up on Islamic Awareness website. You'll see it's part of their list of 63 fragments that they have to amalgamate to get all over the place to find a Quran that's from that's 96% of the Quran by 790. So this is part of it. Boy, did he lie on that. Look up on Islamic Awareness website. It is not there. If it was there, it would be 99% of the Quran. They don't need the other 63. They could have just gone with that, because that's even more than what they're claiming. Nonetheless, what he did realize also is that the Husseini text manuscript has an enormous number of coverings, lots of coverings. Here's one, and I just want to give you this example. This is from the Musaf al-Sharif, their Husseini text there in Egypt. Surah 2, Ayah 191 to 193. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different coverings on one page. When you look at that page, it's almost impossible. Well, it's not quite impossible, and it's almost impossible to read because there's so many coverings. It just looks like chicken scratches by the time you're finished. And you can see these coverings cover what used to be there that are no longer there. And the reason they're all covered is because whatever was there beforehand did not agree with the Hafs text. So how can Muslims say that the Razm has not changed? How can Adnan Rashid say that the Husseini text is exactly the same as the one we have today? Has he looked at even this page? Has he looked at this page? He's going to become a laughing stock because he has not done the homework. Now, I don't expect that the Muslims over here on this side, the ones like the Hijabs and the Adnan Rashid, to have done this kind of homework. They are not academics. Listen, I understand that. Adnan Rushin does not have a degree in this area. I don't know what degree is, but Al-Qadi, Yasser Qadi does have a degree. He has a doctorate. So does Dr. Shabir Ali. They both have doctorates. They live here in the West. They cannot walk away from this kind of evidence. This kind of evidence that Dan Brubaker is finding, this kind of evidence that you're going to now see, because Dan Brubaker wrote this book a year ago. He's coming out with a brand new book this month. Hold on. This is going to be another set. Because these 20 that he has listed here are just 20 of 4,000 that he has found. And these 4,000 variants have nothing to do with Girat over here. They have nothing to do with the 8th and 9th century. These are from the 7th and 8th century. These are the Razm variants. These are much more damaging. And this is where the debate needs to go. And this is where Yasser Qadi has not looked at. And this is where Shabir Ali refuses to answer. After 6 years, he still will not look at what I introduced to him there in Toronto in September of 2014. Yasser Qadi, Shabir Ali, you've got to answer what Brubaker is coming up with. You've got to look at the Razm, skeletal consonantal text, because those consonantal texts, those Qurans, are not the same as the Quran we have today. They do not parallel this Quran. So do not tell me that you have a complete Quran that goes all the way back to Uthman. Now, thank God for Dan Brubaker. He's now just as of yesterday, put up his own YouTube site. And it's called Quran Variant. Isn't that convenient? Quran Variant. Go up and look at it. He's only put up one video so far. It's only been up one day, and already 4,000, 5,000 people have watched it. This should run and run, because he's going to be putting up more videos just looking at all these variants. These are Razm variants. These are the earliest variants. These are not Girat. These are not anything to do with Ahruf. This has nothing to do with dialectical differences. This has nothing to do with recitation. This has nothing to do with readings or transmittings. This is the actual germinal text. Now, so that's number 2. Number 3 is something I want to get to. And this is something I am waiting for. When we were on the ladder there a year ago, introducing this book, Mansour Ahmad, who has been at Speaker's Corner for I don't know how many years, probably decades, one of the most prolific speakers down there, got up and put his ladder next to ours. He didn't ask for permission, he just did it. And he tried to desperately to try to confront these. But then he said something he shouldn't have. He then said, listen, Mr. Smith, we don't care about these, what he called scribal errors. These are nothing more than scribal errors. He said, we can trace a textual history of the Quran all the way back to, he first said Muhammad, then he quickly corrected himself, said Uthman, 652. A textual history of the complete Quran all the way back to 652. A textual history of the entire Quran. He said that a little over a year ago. Yeah, about 20 cameras picked it up. I've got it on mine, and you'll see I've got it now. We filmed it, and I've been showing this around the world. And I remember turning on to him, and I said, okay. Hatu and I were together, and I said, Mansour, are you saying that you can give me a complete Quran by the time of Uthman? Can you show it to me? Where is this 114 surahs? I don't want one snippet here. I don't want 2 folios that you have now been able to find that are radiocarbon dated, that we are now finding are causing all kinds of problems. That's why, because the radiocarbon datings are so inaccurate. But I don't want that. I want a complete Quran by the time of Uthman, because you're the one that's claiming that. You can trace it all the way back to Uthman. 652, 114 surahs. Where is it? He was quiet. So I said, well, what about the 7th century? I'll give you 699. Can you show me anything that goes up to 699? He was quiet again. Then he turned on me and said, you're not listening to what I said. I said, okay, what did you say? Repeat what you said. We can find 97% of the Quran, he said, by the 1st century Hijrah. That means AH, which means from 622 up to 719. I gave him 721. I gave him 2 extra years. So from 622 up to 719, that they can find 97%. Go up and see what he's talking about. You need to go up on Islamic Awareness website, and you need to go where they have all these manuscripts. And they are the ones that house them all. And he's one of the writers for the Islamic Awareness website. And so therefore he should know what he's talking about. So I went up and I looked, and I found out that he doesn't, there is no one manuscript. There's not even one from the 7th century complete. That's from the 7th century. He's talking about fragments. 63 fragments, of which the Husseini is not one of them, of which the Topkapi is not one of them. None of these are one of them, because these are that early. The Ma'il is there, the 2165 is there, but what's fascinating, even by 719, they still cannot find a complete manuscript. So Muslims, would you stop saying that you have a complete manuscript? Would you stop saying that you even know what the Uthmanic manuscript, because you have nothing to show us from Uthman. You have not one manuscript in the 7th century that is complete, not one manuscript from the 7th century that parallels this book. I'm not even talking about the Kitab. I'm just talking about the Razm text. And even the ones that you do have, the 6 major ones you do have, from the 8th and 9th century, Dan is now destroying you because they are not complete. They do not have the same Razm that we have here. So who has done this work yet? Who has done the work of looking at the Hafs text, the Razm, not the Kitab, forget about the Kitab, just looking at the skeletal text, the consonantal text, and compared it with the Topkapi, with the Samarkand, with the Ma'il, with the Petroponus, with the Husseini, with the Sana'a manuscript? Who has done that yet? We're doing it. Hold on to what we're going to tell you. This is yet to come out. Ooh, this is yet to come out. Folks, when you hear Muslims say that the Quran is preserved completely, they have to say it, especially those over here. They have to say it because the Quran says it. Because in chapter 85, verse 22, this is the Quran that is unfettered by human hands. This is the eternal Quran. What Qira'at they had in heaven, I don't know. Which one of the Qira'at is that in those preserved times? Remember, there was no Qira'at at the time. Well, according to Islam, it was never created. It's the uncreated Quran. But when it was sent down to Muhammad, Muhammad didn't have any Qira'at because he was just repeating it. He didn't write it down in his lifetime. Zayd ibn Thabit, his secretary, finally wrote it down in 632. But there was no Qira'at even then, even though Ibn Mujahid, who is talking about it from the 10th century, said there were 7. Where and what 7? Let's not even get into that. Because you can't even come up with one manuscript that has any Qira'at, that has any vowelization, that has any dots from the time of Uthman. In fact, you Muslims can't even come up with one manuscript from the time of Uthman. Where is this Uthmanic manuscript? So you're always asking us, where's our Bible? Where's our original Bible? Have we ever said we had the original? Have we ever made that claim? We've never made that claim. And yet you are always hitting us over the head with the fact that you have the original Quran, that you have the Uthmanic recension, that you have the original Quran, all 114 surahs. You're still claiming that. And that Quran that you have in your hand, this one right here, is exactly the same as that which was finally canonized by Uthman, the Qureshi dialect, that exists in heaven. That's what you've been claiming. You've been doing it for quite a while, as long as I've been working for 40 years. And this has been going on for, oh goodness, for about 1,000 years. This has been going on. Yet we're now asking you probably the greatest question. If you are going to claim that, then show us, where is that manuscript from the 7th century, from the time of Uthman? Where is it? Don't talk to me about an archetypal Quran, an archetype Quran, a Q document. Please don't tell me of that, because that's not what you're claiming. That's not what God said in chapter 15, verse 9, when he would preserve it. If your Allah is really God, if he is really God, then how could he not even preserve Uthman's recension? Remember, Uthman, according to Al-Bukhari, chapter 6, verse 1, hadith number 510, said that he sent it all to every province. There were at least 4 provinces. Where are those 4 Qurans? If your God is really God, how come he couldn't even preserve one of them? Where is even one of those 4 Qurans? And don't go to the Topkapi, don't go to the Husseini, don't go to the Samarkand, don't go to any of the 6 major manuscripts, because they're all too late. Give me that manuscript that you claim you have. Show it to me. Show it to the world. Look at the Razm, and let's compare it with the Razm of this text, and let's see if they are the same. That's the challenge I give to you Muslims. And I'll keep challenging you that. What's happened this week and the last week, and maybe the last 3 weeks since Shabbat Ali made his claim, are only over here. They're just trying to keep us on the Qira'at argument. They really don't want us to get to the Razm argument. The Razm argument is by far the more difficult argument. And if Yasser Qadhi had a crisis of faith at Yale University 25 years ago about these questions, about these Qira'at readers and narrators, if that caused him a crisis of faith, what do you think it's going to cause him when he finds out what Dan Brubaker is coming up with? When he starts reading this book, when he starts looking and see exactly the claims that they make, they can't even hold to. If you cannot support these claims, then don't make them. Don't make them. Because what we're finding out is that your book, the Quran, this book is not from heaven. This did not come from God. It didn't even come from Muhammad. It certainly didn't come from Uthman. It looks like it was starting to be put together after Abdul Malik. Ooh, have I heard that name before? Yes, almost all the videos I've been talking about since January are all dealing with the 7th century. I've been looking for, you know, that common thing we say is, where's Waldo? I've been looking for Muhammad. Where's Muhammad? Where's Mecca? Where are these people called Muslims? Where is this religion called Islam? Where is this book called the Quran from the 7th century? That's all I've been asking for 6 months now. Where is your man? Where is your book? The book of the man, the book of the man. You claim that you have the book. You claim you have the man. You claim that the book is the Quran. You claim the man is Muhammad. You claim that they lived in Mecca, that they were called Muslim, that they belonged to a religion called Islam. And you claim that that he received this book from 610 to 632. And you can't support anything you've just claimed, because everything you're going to tell me are from the 8th, 9th, and 10th century. Please stop talking about the 8th, 9th, and 10th century. I want the 7th century. I want this book that you're claiming. Even the text that we are looking at from the 8th and 9th century, they still aren't even equal. They don't parallel each other. They are not complete. And all of them have hundreds, sometimes thousands of variants with this book. That's what Dan's showing us. That's what your own scholars have shown you. Phew, I've said quite a bit. I hope that all makes sense. In the last 2 weeks, we have just been talking about the Gerat. Now we're moving over to the Razm. And it's this material that I want to hear you Muslims refer to. I want to hear you Muslims persuade me that you do have this book that's complete from the time of Uthman, that I can look at in my hands today. That's exactly the same as the one I have that you chose in 1924 from a man who's from Kufa. You didn't even choose the right city. You didn't even choose the right country. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Anyhow, can you see why we're still asking what we're saying? We're going to continue asking. Please stop calling us Islamophobes and Islamic haters. We're not Islamophobes. We're not Islamic haters. We're asking a perfectly good question, because the same question was asked of our Bible. Where do you think all these different criticisms come from? The same question was asked of our Bible back in the 1800s. Did we call anybody Christianophobes for asking those questions? Did we threaten people, call them haters for asking those questions? No, we encourage them to ask questions of the Bible. First of all, we don't make the same claims. We never made the claims that you Muslims have made about your Quran. This is not eternal. Well, it's written by men. We know whose names they are. We put the names on them. Sent down? No, it was not sent down. Revealed, yes, and inspired by God, but each one of those men wrote in their own styles. And yes, we do have 4 Gospels, not 30 like you have. We have 4, and they all agree. Oh, they say it different ways, but they all agree about what Jesus said and what he did. Has it been changed? Yes, we would admit there are changes. We know where they are, and that's because we've done our homework. We even warned the reader, be careful of these verses. There's about 40 of them, just 40 of them that we're talking about. Be careful of them because they're not in the original, or should say the earliest Greek manuscripts. That's all we're saying. See, we don't make these same claims you make. Eternal, sent down, complete, and unchanged. We don't make that about this book. We never made that about this book. Now, no longer can you make that about this book. After what's happened the last 3 weeks, you cannot say that it was eternal. You cannot say that it was sent down. You cannot say that it was complete. And you cannot say it's unchanged. All of those have been destroyed in the last 3 weeks. But see, that's all you have to go on. But hold on a minute, I want to come back to this again. This is not the only word of God we have. And I said this 6 years ago, so this is not new for some of you. And remember what I said to Shabbat Ali. I said, this is not the only word of God we have. We have another word of God. He's called the Logos in John 1. His name is Jesus Christ, the Word of God. Is he eternal? Yes, he is. Was he sent down? Yes, he was. Is he complete? Absolutely. Has he ever changed? Not at all. And he's still waiting for every one of you to come to him. That's the Word of God, the eternal Word of God, the sent down Word of God, the complete Word of God, the unchanged Word of God. He never changes. And he's always asking for you to come on home, come on home, come on home to him. God bless you. I hope you get it now. I hope it all makes sense. Can you then understand why we are asking these questions and why this whole world is going topsy-turvy in the last 3 weeks? Finally, Muslim scholars over here in the Western world are finally admitting that they cannot stipulate, they cannot even answer, what about the preservation of the Quran? We don't have to answer that about our Bible, but we certainly do about Jesus Christ. If you really want the Word of God that is complete, unchanged, and eternal, come on home to Jesus Christ. God bless you. This is Jay, over and out.